Okay, so what I'm going to show everyone is a real live case study of an SME business acquisition. And I want to point out before we start, this was an asset purchase. It was an asset purchase. We're buying the assets of the business, and the incumbent owner had to shut down the business at Companies House. There's two other ways, and this is my favourite way of acquiring a business. It's very, very simple. But you can do a share for share purchase, or you can do a complete share purchase, of course. What I'm showing you here is an asset purchase. So, the business, and listen, this is months of preparation, months of due diligence. I'm going to round up and round down numbers, but understand there was a lot of people involved, the two sets of accountants, the two sets of lawyers. I was spearheading it. I was not an owner of the purchasing business. I was a non-exec director in the purchasing business, so I was project managing the acquisition itself. So, the business we were buying had £2 million turnover. £2 million turnover. They had 25% net margin. 25% net margin. So the profits, they're a service-based business. This is a service-based business. Most of the guys listening to this ladies or gents, wish your net margin was that. So they had £500,000 net profits. £500,000 net profits. I'm rounding up and rounding down, guys, to keep it very, very simple. Now, if I'm looking at an asset purchase, I'm usually, as a rule of thumb, I'm usually starting around 3 times EBITDA. 3 times the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. Now, I'm going to keep it simple. We're going to do 3 times net profit. 3 times net profit. Just to keep it very simple. This is where the lawyers were involved to figure out what the EBITDA was. So we're going to do 3 times net profit. That's a rule of thumb, which means the business valuation in this case was £1.5 million. 1.5 million is a business valuation. That's what we had to buy to which we had to pay for the business itself. Now, when we looked at the due diligence, we realised that the incumbent owner gave about £400,000 of bad debt away to another company in Manchester. It was a family business that he lent it to in Manchester. It ain't coming back. It's just not coming back. So what we decided on was 1.2 million. 1.2 million is a valuation of this business itself. So, how do we service that? How do we break that down? Well, first of all, the owner had £300,000 of equity in his business. Should never have been there. It should have been invested. But the fact is, he had £300,000 worth of equity in his business. And no one is due that. He's due that right up front. So where did that come from? Well, I work with a lot of serial investors, a lot of high net worth serial investors. So we went to 6 investors who we've worked with a lot through acquisitions, and they each gave us £50,000. They each gave us £50,000 investment into this acquisition. So, £50,000 from each of them, 6 times £50,000, and we're paying that back at 8% interest over 5 years. 8% interest over 5 years. Now, that would cost the company probably roughly £65,000 a year to manage that debt. So £65,000 to manage that debt. That leaves us with, of course, the £900,000. We have to get our £900,000, 1.2 million minus 300,000. We have to get the £900,000 to the owner. And we're paying the owner that back over 5 years at 8% interest. So again, 8% interest over 5 years. That means the owner each year is getting £195,000. £195,000 per year for the next 5 years. Fantastic deal, great deal. The owner is getting £195,000 over the next 5 years. That's a service that 900,000 at 8% interest. Yep, everyone follow that? So in total, our debt that we have is around £260,000. £260,000. Now, when I told you this, when we started this, I showed you how we bought a 2 million turnover business for zero. Zero money we spent in this business. So the question is, we know where we're getting this from, but we have to service it. Where are we getting all that debt from? And the answer is, of course, from the profits. We'd be left with £240,000 profits, net profits. Would you happy with £240,000 net profits each year for the next 5 years? Who else are paying this off? I wouldn't be, not at all. Because we're going to grow this business by 40% year on year. 40% year on year. So our plan to have that paid off in 3 years. We're going to pay that off and that off within 3 years by increasing the net profits in that business by 40% year on year. Does that make sense? So here's the question. How much money did my fellow directors and myself actually spend to buy that £2 million business? Zero. It cost us absolutely nothing. The business bought itself off itself. Does that make sense? But that's not the full story. This was part of a growth acquisition strategy, again, of a service-based business. So what we had was, we creating a holdings company. We're creating a holdings company, and that holdings company had a SAS, a small self-administered scheme, pension scheme, that's designed specifically for directors, multiple directors of a business. And below that holdings company, we had the original company. We then acquired company 2, and this was us acquiring company 3. This was the second acquisition, if you like, in succession. We also had another company, which was company 4. And this was for a property company, property development company. And I'll explain that in a minute. What you have to realise is, these are all ring fenced. We moved all the assets, including of course the people, the biggest asset in any business, we moved that over to company 3 under 2 pay rules. We did it absolutely the right way, and we had to understand that liability. But what I didn't want to do was create a lot of debt liability in that company. Because we wanted to we wanted to buy the property. We also wanted to buy the property. And to buy the property, we had a 70% loan to value. And we had to finance that 70%. The 30% came from the SAS. It lent to the business. But we had to finance this 70%. So the objective was not to show liabilities in this company. And this is where some accountants, now I'm not an accountant, guys. I ain't an accountant. My job is to give you a better relationship with your accountant so you can ask better questions of your accountant. But some accountants may disagree with me here, and that's fine, just go with me. So what we had to do was protect the balance sheet. You're always trying to protect the balance sheet. And let me tell you this. If I'm working with a business, the first thing I look at is never the profits. Never. I don't even get near the profit and loss. Doesn't tell me anything. All it tells me how you got to your balance sheet. Your balance sheet tells you how healthy you are. It's that you have to protect. So what I'm trying to do here is protect my balance sheet. In fact, if you look at business is not about profits. Profits are a promise, unless you're a sole trader, unless you're paid point of use or a sole trader. Profits are a promise. If you want to maximise your business's wealth, then you have to maximise your margins, your working capital, and your equity. 5 things plus margins create profits. Margins create profits. You must know and maximise your margins. Working capital is not cash flow, but it indicates how healthy your cash flow is. It is, in fact, your net current assets minus your net current liabilities, which all banks will look at to figure out how healthy you are. It tells me your debt gearing, how geared you are to be able to pay your creditors without waiting on someone paying you. So it really tells me how healthy this business is, especially if we're going to purchase it. And equity is what you own. If you have a limited company, it's equity that you own. Just like if you have a house that's worth $240,000 and you have a £200,000 mortgage on that house, what you own is the 40% equity. The £40,000 equity, sorry. So that's what you actually own. This is what we're trying to maximise. So I'm trying to protect the balance sheet in this deal. So here's what we do. Here's your balance sheet. And let me mention this, when it comes to balance sheet, here's what all business owners, all SME business owners must understand. A equals L plus E, I will come back to that, but it is the language of business. It's certainly the language your accountant uses, but you need to at least understand it. You don't have to speak it, you just need to be able to understand and interpret it. A equals L plus E, I'll come back to that. So here's your balance sheet. Unless I know I'm whizzing through this, that's fine, just bear with me. Balance sheet is made up of 3 sections, 2 halves. Remember, I'm not an accountant. So on the left-hand side, it is things and stuff. Things and stuff. Your chairs, your people, the money in your bank, the tables that you have, the equipment that you have. It's things and stuff. It's things and stuff. Your accountant will call that assets. In a business, it's mostly depreciating assets. Your accountant will call it assets. On this side is what you owe and what you own. That's it. What you owe, things and stuff, what you owe and what you own. Now your accountant, again, will call this liabilities. And they'll call this equity. Assets equals liability plus equity. This side of the balance sheet must equal that side of the balance sheet. So let me show you how that works. I did not want this £300,000 sitting in here as a liability because I wanted to asset finance or get a commercial mortgage onto property. So what we did was, and some accountants won't like this, that's fine, you know, it's the objective we're trying to get to. We made these shareholders Z-type shareholders, not directors. They became Z-type shareholders with no say in the board of directors. This £300,000 was a shareholder's loan to the business, not a director's loan to the business, a shareholder's loan to the business. And we chose to show that as ownership. We owned that. So £300,000 sat in there. And of course we had the £300,000 in our bank, so it's also an asset. A equals liability plus equity, 300,000 plus 300 equals 300,000. We're in balance, okay? Now I know some accountants will say that really shouldn't go in there. Guys, under new rules, shareholder loan to the business, I can certainly put it down here. They had no votes in the board of directors. They had no votes and they were paid back via dividend, which is tax efficient to them to a certain extent. Does that make sense? So we're protecting the health of the business itself. So there you go. A £200,000 genuine live asset purchase of a 25% net margin business for £0. £0.